Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here with books that I've read in the last 6 months. Now, I am doing this video not to brag about the number of books I've read, but to demonstrate how few I have read. Someone asked how many books do I read a week, and I answered between 0 and 3. Now, if you did an average, it would be less than 1 per week, because sometimes I make it for a month without reading a book all the way through. But if you count all the ones that I start and don't finish, or all the ones where I read the first chapter or the introduction in the first chapter and don't have any intention of continuing reading, I just want to know what it's about, or the ones where I open and read somewhere in the middle a few chapters like Churchill's life, I don't care about his World War I history. I want to know about Churchill in World War II. So there's lots of reading that gets done without reading all the way through the book. Plus, tons of information is to be had on Google Video and YouTube and so on, as you probably know if you're watching this video. So I'm now going to show you the books I've read in the last 6 months since I've moved to New York City, since we moved to this apartment in which I sit. Greek Science in Antiquity by Marshall Clagett. Now, I actually read this before and reread all except 1 or 2 chapters for a video series I did called Energy, Mass, and Matter, or something like that. The Invention of Air by Stephen Johnson, Book 2. Just finished that one a couple weeks ago. The Great Merchants by Mahoney, published in 52 or so. Give War a Chance by P.J. O'Rourke. Now, I kind of am cheating on this because I've started this around Christmas time, a week or so before we moved to this apartment. So, slight cheat with that one, but not too bad. America Alone by Mark Stein. Pretty good read. Tales from the Edge, True Adventures in Alaska. Very fluffy. Only worth reading if you want to read about Alaska. The Great Plains by Walter Prescott Webb. Huge post-it note sticking out. The Enterprising Americans by John Chamberlain. And last but not least, Bloody Falls of the Coppermine, which I just finished last week, I believe. Now that's 9 books that I've finished all the way through. The books that I've started, the books that I've read a chapter or 2, or read halfway through, or just read the introduction, they outnumber these books at least 10 to 1, probably 20 to 1. Maybe 30 to 1. Massively more books are started or sampled and just tasted a bit from here and there than are read all the way through, in my experience, in the way that I study. So if you think that I seem to know more than the average Joe on the street, take this advice. Just ignore that commandment that Moses brought down from the mountain, that thou shalt finish a book before thou starts another. Ignore that. Don't worry about it. Here we have 9 books that I've read all the way through, and the pages, just the sheer number of pages in the books that I haven't read all the way through, probably outnumber these ones 4 or 5 or 6 to 1, and the number of books outnumber these 30 or 40 to 1 maybe. Huge disparity. There's no reason to read things if they're boring you. Now, a couple of examples of other books that I read some of. Freud's Dora, an analysis of a case of hysteria, I read almost halfway through, or maybe a little more than halfway. Yeah, more than halfway through that. John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, I've read almost all the way, just about to the end of that. A book about Francis Bacon by Catherine Drinker Bowen. Democracy in America by Tocqueville. Candide by Voltaire, which I've continued reading but still haven't finished. The thing is, it's brilliant. Candide is. Certainly would be more brilliant if I was extremely concerned with religion, the history of religion. I'm mildly concerned with the history of religion, but I'm less fascinated by it than other things. People who find religion extremely repulsive do well to read Voltaire. But the problem I have with Voltaire, with Candide anyway, is that it's fiction. And I just cannot handle fiction. Fountainhead was good, Atlas Shrugged was good, but even there, reading through them, you know it's an imaginary world and nothing there is real. Absolutely worth reading, but still. Another example, George Orwell's Selected Essays. I'm on page 143 of 191 pages, so 3/4 of the way through that. Again and again this happens, and I'm actually going to finish that. This is going well, and I plan to do some more excerpts from this. I did one on his essay on coal, but I want to do a bit on what he says about Shakespeare, which you may find interesting. So I read between 0 and 3 books a week, but when I do read 3 books a week, that's only the rate at which I read. Rarely like I'll finish a book in 2 or 3 days, and then I won't read another book all the way through for a week or two, sometimes. Sometimes I will read 2 books in a week. The point is that much information is to be gotten by sampling books and taking what you need, and a lot on the internet on videos, which is wonderful. For example, if you don't have the time to read John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, you can watch my video on it. If you've never read Machiavelli's The Prince, you can watch my videos on it. So, and it's abridged, but it's abridged by a brilliant and talented person. Yeah. Whatever. There you have it. Mr. Cropper reads quite a lot, but in 6 months I've only finished 9 books all the way through. So hopefully that's a lesson to some of you, that you don't need to read the book to the end before you start the next one, and it's perfectly okay to have a pile of books with a bookmark somewhere in the middle of them next to your bed or on your desk or whatever, and be on your way through them and maybe never get through them. And if you get bored, put them back on the shelf and get another. Perfectly okay. Now, I finish by saying that someone, Graytex, said, Mr. Cropper, you moved to New York City and you sit in an apartment and read. Seems like a waste of time or something like that. A waste of your location. And it just so happens he left that comment on the day when I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art with a couple of other objectivists. And people have suggested to me that I get into meetup groups and meet objectivists and stuff here in the city, without knowing that I've gone to many meetup groups since I moved here. Objectivists and Drinking with Atheists and what's the other one? Midtown Meetup for the Ayn Rand group. They aren't necessarily all objectivists, but a bunch of them knew Ayn Rand personally. Very good stuff. So I am involved in all that stuff, but I think there's a lot to be gained from reading. And it's a shame that Graytex thinks it's such a waste of time to be sampling the likes of Orwell and Voltaire. But then he wouldn't be Graytex if he thought otherwise, would he?